Good morning and welcome back to Black Bear Forge and the Hook of the Week. Today I thought I would use this piece of material. We cut some off the other day to make a candle sconce, but for some reason in the past I had drawn this out and flattened this back section. I have no idea why, but it's a nice textured, about 1/8 inch thick piece of material at this point, and I think we are going to make a single piece hook with a back plate out of that. Now what my idea is going to be to cut a long slot on 3 sides here, and then we will bend the hook part out. And exactly the length, I'm going to lay this out, try to come up with what I think is the right proportions for this. And I'm going to make it wide enough that I can use this chisel under the treadle hammer, and I'm going to set my width based on the width of this chisel because that way it'll be a lot easier. And I'm going to do most of this cutting under the treadle hammer. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and cut this off across here just so I've got even stuff. And I'm going to do a little bit of quick grinding on this and make it a little more even. If you really like rough and ragged and freeform, maybe you don't want to do that, but I think I'd like straight edges on this. Then I'll lay it out so that I've got a nice sized hook in there, but not too big. I think what I've got drawn here right now is a little bit too long. We'll make it a little bit shorter than that. Then we'll go over to the treadle hammer and cut in our lines cold at the treadle hammer, heat it up, cut through hot, shape the hook, put some holes in it, and it should be done. It should be fairly straightforward, fairly simple. No riveting, no forge welding, just a few holes and some chisel cuts. So I think I want to leave a fair amount top and bottom here. It's 1 3/4 inches, so I'm just going to mark that same 1 3/4 inches both sides here. And that'll keep the hook kind of centered. And then I'm going to just sort of eyeball this for now, make a couple of marks. And a square like this can be quite handy for making parallel lines, if you can hold on to the piece and draw it the square at the same time. Putting it in the vise really helps, but if you do this from both sides, you should end up with nice even lines, and that should be pretty much the size of my chisel. So I don't want to cut out all of that. I only want to cut out 3 sides. And we're going to do that at the treadle hammer. And initially, all I really want to do here is just get a good mark that I can find. You can do all this cold. Treadle hammer is a good way to do that. And depending on what you're trying to accomplish, it may be worth doing it cold. But I think we can cut through this hot. It'll be a little bit faster. You notice my fingers are staying outside the strike of the hammer here. So that's got a nice line we'll be able to find again hot. Because this is kind of rounded, I can tip it up and get right into the corner. You don't want to tip it too far, it'll shoot out of the hammer, but easy enough to get that slot cut. Now because I might cut through this pretty quickly, I'm going to put a soft plate on there. This is just a big heavy piece of brass, probably 1/2 inch brass. Got a frame around it so it sits on the die and won't fall off. I need to flatten this out. Tends to want to curl up as you chisel. Now, typically, I do not work off to the side like this too much, but I wanted to give the cameras the best views. Typically, I would come in this way and work like this, but there's just not room for me today. Good idea to work slowly when cutting things like this with a chisel. It keeps from deforming all in one area. If you just cut this, it's going to make this bow over, but if you go back and forth and do a pass on each side, then it ends up coming out neater and cleaner. And that's whether you're doing it with the anvil by hand or cold or whatever you're doing. Just work around your whole line incrementally, and you'll be happier with it in the long run. Let's see if you can see this here. I'm starting to break through, so that's pretty much all cut. This will be something easy to pop out at the vise. I think the only place I still need to really make sure it's clear is this end cut, so I'm going to just worry about that. And to cut that, I'm going to go to a chisel that has a sharper corner, and we'll get into that corner just a little bit better than that rounder one will. This is one I usually use handheld, and I put a stop in so I can't squish my hand, and then only on cold material. But since this is hot, I'll just hold it with a pair of tongs. We're going to do a nice neat job in the corner that'll leave a little telltale bevel, and if we can leave as much of that as possible, I'll be happier. So I'm trying to go very evenly there, but I think this is pretty much through. I think we're going to take that to the vise now, and we'll just shear that out in the vise. So I've let this cool off. I'm going to stand that up in the vise with the base plate supported by the vise. I'm going to use this same little chisel then to just start shearing that off in there. And that pretty much did the whole thing. But just to be sure, I could go to a bigger chisel at this stage if I wanted to, but this tool's in my hand, so we're just kind of shearing that cut at this point because it already wants to break there. I think the next thing I want to do is just take this to the forge again. I want to bend it here so I can get in here with a file and I can clean this up because it is sharp and ragged. But I want to leave as much of that bevel as I can. So one of the advantages to doing this with a chisel instead of a little cutoff disc is that you get that bevel that looks really good in the finished product. Mostly I just want to bend this out so I can get to it. Actually, in the long run, I'll probably bend it the other way, but this just gets it out of the way for now so I can get in here and file that. Now, that's really all the filing I need to do. This should have holes in it. You could do 2 top and bottom, but I think it'll look better with 4 in the corners. And I think I'll just punch those cold with the little Whitney punch. I'm going to straighten that back out so I can push it the other way, but I think first we'll put a touch mark in it. People always worry that I might forget my touch mark. So now the question is, what do you want your hook to look like? You could do all sorts of things with this. You could take that hook part and you could flare it. You could draw it out to a taper, put a curly Q on it. Whatever it is you want to do. Personally, I want to leave it as close to the original cutout as possible because I think that's part of the character of this hook is that you can tell that it was cut out of that main part and you can see how it fits back together again. So mostly I'm just going to bend it out here and then put the hook in it so that it's got a nice hook on there. And I suppose you could hook it up this way and let it hang down. Then my touch mark would be upside down. So lots of things you could do to this at this point. But I think I'm going to keep it fairly simple. Just bring this back out to the front and put a hook in it. Maybe a little bit of a roll over at the top, but not a full scroll. I'll make sure I know which side the front is there. This would probably be easier to go back to the vise, but since I'm at the anvil. I'm just going to roll that end over just enough to make it a little bit more graceful. Nothing too much. And I think a scrolling fork will be the easy way to get in there to bend that up. Now what would you use this hook for? I have no idea. It could be a coat hook. It's probably strong enough to hold a school backpack. It's big enough you could use it for hoses or something like that, extension cords. But that is pretty much the entire hook. And of course I'll put some paste wax on this when we're done. Let it cool. Now having a treadle hammer available certainly makes cutting something like this out go a lot faster, a lot easier, probably have a little bit more control over it, but you can certainly do it at the anvil, either hot or cold. You can do a lot of it at the vise, shearing it out the way that we sheared this out. You could even do it with a little cutoff disc, but you lose that bevel, and I think the bevel is part of what makes this look good. Really a fairly simple hook, but people are impressed that you were able to cut that out without having some sort of a fancy machine shop. Now the other thing that I always try to include with a hook, and I don't always mention this, I try to include screws that match, and I always try to use slotted screws because they look so much better, at least in my opinion, than Phillips head screws do. And if you don't include screws, frequently you end up with silver flathead screws where you should have had a round head screw, or you end up with drywall screws, or something that really detracts from the effort you put into making a nice hook in the first place. So taking the time to make up some screws is really worth it. It's not hard to do. I did a video quite a while ago about how I treat the screws and how I get them to color match and take care of the zinc plating and all that. And I'll link to that right up here for you, so if you're interested in that, you can take a look at it. But that is our hook for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button down there. Ring the bell next to the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified when I make new videos. Stick around for a while, watch a few of my older videos, share those videos with your friends if you'd like. And if you'd like to provide financial support for the videos here at Black Bear Forge, there are links in the video description for both PayPal and Patreon. Those are merely donations, the content is free. In the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.